Hey, welcome back to Evil's Comics. I'm Evil Mike, and I got a review for you. From Comixology and Dark Horse Comics, this is Night of the Ghoul. It is written by Scott Snyder, art and colors by Francesco Francavilla, and letters by AndWorld Design. Um, this book was amazing. If you didn't know, it was already optioned right before it was released, and I can definitely see why. So basically, in a nutshell, this is playing off of like the old Universal monster movies, and supposedly Night of the Ghoul is a old film that was lost back in time. But let's get in there. The story sets up in the California desert, and we're following Forrest Inman and his son Orson. And they are on their way to this hospice to go meet Mr. Patrick, which is supposedly the director of this said lost film, Night of the Ghoul. They do get to the hospice, and the hospice is working with them. We find out that Forrest Inman kind of lied to get here. We don't hear about the lie until a little later. But we just basically find out at this point that the son is not so eager to go, go do this interview, even though we find out that the son has had a lot to do with actually finding this man. Basically from this, from the director and the nurse at this hospice there, Forrest is allowed 20 minutes to go talk with Mr. Patrick. And we see he does not disappoint. He is grisly looking. He is so badass looking. But supposedly this is the long lost director of this Night of the Ghoul film. But the director's name is actually T.F. Merritt, and supposedly this guy has hidden his his life and blah blah blah, and he is under the new alias of Mr. Patrick. I don't remember if they mention his first name. I don't think they do. But basically, we find out right here that Forrest Inman lied, and we find out that it was like about some life insurance policy or something like that, and that's how he got in the door and got this interview. And at this time, he reveals that he has figured out and knows who Mr. Patrick really is, that he's T.F. Merritt, and he's the director of this long lost film. And it is revealed that he actually has a piece of the film that he found while working at some archival place. And at this time, T.F. Merritt, in the beginning, was claiming that he was not T.F. Merritt, and as soon as the film comes out, he is like, oh, how much have you seen of it? And that's where we get bits and pieces of the real film, Night of the Ghoul. Supposedly, it's supposed to be a long-lost film that is in the same universe as the Wolfman and Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein and Creature of the Black Lagoon, and it was supposed to be around that time, and it was supposed to be the best, horror, movie of that time, but sadly, it got lost in a fire, supposedly. At this point, the movie, the story kind of breaks down. We get to find out the movie plot, and it's basically about these two soldiers, Johnny and Kurt, and their little platoon, and they're being sent to go find this village during World War II or something like that. It's called Kulla. Supposedly they found these Nazi Germans that have taken over this town, and they're on their way to go liberate it or something like that. They do eventually find the town, and as soon as they found the town, they notice something, that there's nobody actually in the town. They think it's a trap, and at this point there's a discussion on whether the troops should move forward or kind of go backwards, but at this point it's kind of discussed that it's more important to make sure that it's not a trap for the other infantry that they have waiting to go rescue this town or whatever. And this kind of where the story cuts off. Honestly, I love how they do this, how we get little bits and pieces of the movie, and it kind of goes into, this is like all the bits and pieces that he got at that time, but it does go back over into the conversation with Forrest and T.F. Merritt, and him telling him that he's a fan, that it's a masterpiece, that he always knew it was, and And this is where the book kind of gives us the most major twist I did not see coming. But after this guy's like, showing him, he's got like actual movie posters and stuff like that, stuff that was leading him to finally find the films, because before it was just a myth that this thing existed, but yet he'd find like, a movie poster or something like that. But we found out from Mr. Merritt that the accident, didn't quite go like that, that that it was supposedly a fire, and that's what destroyed the film. And now we found out that there is this he explains that there is a group of individuals that had kidnapped him and got rid of all the evidence of the film. Supposedly the film was the other way around, where he was trying to disclose the information of the ghoul, because the ghoul is physically real. Now that he has seen the movie, and that's kind of why I expressed how much as he had seen, supposedly the ghoul can interact with him, type of thing. There is a mention that in this movie it was one of the most creative things that that would have happened, because the ghoul actually explained other monster phenomenons, like a blood plague created by the ghoul that kills people but preserves their bodies, causing the legend of the vampires. There was like a brain-eating infection creating the myth of zombies, and supposedly it was going to start like how the Wolfman existed, the creature of the Black Lagoon, and supposedly it was just it was diseases and viruses that the ghoul kind of like shed or something like that. It does mention quite a bit about the ghoul and its powers, and supposedly it feeds on dead things, and eventually after it's gotten so full, it releases like a deadly plague or a pestilence. That's why like it explains like every 100 years why like a massive plague hits the planet. Supposedly it's always been because of these ghouls or whatever. The story jumps back over to Orson, the son, and as he's kind of exploring the hospice while he's waiting for the 20 minutes to be over. It is noted like from the beginning that stuff is following him, and whenever he turns around it's not there. But in heavy detail, stuff is following the son. We go back into more about the movie, and it's more like the soldiers are exploring Kulla. They do find that this ransacked like room where there's tons of bodies that have been desecrated, and they're decaying, but they also find out that because originally they thought that this was all the Germans that did this, but at this time they find out that there's townspeople and Germans mixed in the bodies, so they're not so sure that this is the Germans that did this. As soon as they kind of realize this kind of lady pops up, and she looks like she's melting. She gives off some warning in a foreign language, but it's all like detached, and they can't really get a piece of everything she says, but they do have a translator, and the translator said it was hard to make out, but it sounded like we tried to stop it, but it escaped. And then she was saying, run away from it, and the other soldiers were like, from what? And she just says, the ghoul. It goes back to the conversation with Merritt and Forrest, and basically at this time, like, Merritt pours him a drink, tells him to drink the drink and that he's tainted, and we get to find out a little more about the group that supposedly kidnapped Merritt. Supposedly the hospice is a sham, and this group that idols the ghoul or something like that, they have set up this hospice, and they are basically keeping T.F. Merritt their hostage because he knows the truth about the ghoul, and that's why they destroyed the film back in the day, because it was T.F. Merritt's design to tell the world about the ghoul, but it kind of backfired. Now he's being kept prisoner and he can't escape. He even says that they drug his like alcohol and stuff like that, and he explains that now that Forrest is there, that he's probably going to die too. The book goes back to the movie at this point, and we get to see a little more, and this is where we get to see a lot like how the ghoul made it like stateside or whatever, because at this time the troop is outside Kulla, and they're starting to experience weird phenomena, maybe going insane, stuff like that. One of the I don't remember if it's either Johnny or Kurt, but I think it's Kurt, but he comes out here, and we do see that in shadow form that the ghoul goes after him. and we see how the ghoul infects people. It kind of goes inside you, and it kind of like it shows that it like lives in your eye or whatever, and that's how it kind of gets around. It like, I guess, goes back out and, leaves when it needs to, and it eats on dead things. And supposedly it does that in the shadows. They kind of give a lot more lore into the, and this is the movie's version of the lore into the ghoul, like the dead things it eats and stuff like that. They also go into that there's not just one ghoul out there, that there's many different ghouls, but and that they're more ancient than the earth kind of thing. But the one that the movie focuses on is like the most evil and vile of these ghouls or whatever. The movie kind of jumps back where it progresses, and they, I guess, freed all the people of color, and it goes forward where Kurt and Johnny are going back stateside. Kurt is acting weird at this moment, and I'm sorry if I'm mixing up the names, but basically one of them has the ghoul and the other one doesn't know it. They go back to where they're from in America, and the one that is infected, I want to say it's Kurt, but he has a son, and earlier he was talking about his son, and as soon as they get back, it's almost like he doesn't realize him. We're supposed to know that the ghoul is inside him, and Kurt's not exactly the same person he is. His friend even makes a statement like, "Nah, your dad's just tired from the trip. He knows who you are. Come on, you're a son," and stuff like that. The son making a weird note about who this guy that is talking to him, and Kurt was supposed to set up like, "Hey, this is my best friend Johnny. He's really kind of like your uncle," kind of thing. And it's that part of the story is expressed like early on in the book, and finally when we get here back to America during the movie. But since Kurt is infected, or not even him anymore because he has the ghoul in him, none of that is there anymore. Basically at this point, it is T.F. Merritt and Forrest, and T.F. Merritt is basically saying that, now that you came, there was two things that were going to happen. He was like, one, he was like, the world was eventually going to, like this group that has me kidnapped, they were eventually going to release the ghoul and start what they were going to do, but they were waiting on it. And now that you showed up, kind of like a reporter, poking your nose into stuff that they don't want you to poke your nose in. Now they're going to do it tonight. You're going to die, your son's going to die, I'm going to die. And he was like, and they're going to start out their plan. And right after he says this, we go back to the son and what he's doing. Like off and on, he's been talking to his mom, and we find out that like the mom and the husband are divorced or going through a divorce, and they're living separately. The son doesn't want to really be here, but he's being forced to by his mom. And that's kind of where we find out that he did most of the investigation report on trying to find out who T.F. Merritt was. Basically at this point, like this is where like the ghoul is specifically messing with him or this group, because as he's traveling further in the hospice, it's just getting creepier and creepier. He eventually makes it to this door where it says, like, I think it says children. Yeah, it says children, like right here. And he happens to go through the door. He is trying to find, he lost power on his phone, and that's what he's trying to find, like either power or someone to help. And he just comes to this door with like, it looks like a whole bunch of like dead kids in this room, and that's kind of where it shuts back. It goes back to T.F. Merritt and Forrest, and it's kind of relating the thing, that now he's about to die. You don't realize like that what you've stepped into. There is a little more explanation about the group. They have a name. I forget. Oh, the Order of the Fly. It's expressed in the movie, and I guess Forrest kind of overlooked it. But T.F. Merritt is basically explaining like, hey, if you're a real fan, you're supposed to know about this group. It was in the movie, and that's when we get the name, the Order of the Fly. Kind of like right after this, we see that the Order of the Fly was watching the whole time, and they're right behind. And this is probably where the last we see of him. And that's basically it. We see a little more with like Kurt back home with the son, with the ghoul in him, and kind of how he like, travels around and stuff like that. They do express at one time that Kurt went to go get like x-rays or something like that because he was acting funny. And that's the very last page of the book, is we get to see the results from the x-rays. Even though the doctors didn't see anything, the son definitely does. But we get to see right here, you can kind of see the ghoul, like, you know, it's like a shadow, and I guess that's why the doctors didn't see it. They do give us a preview of the next cover, which looks amazing. That's pretty much the review. My thoughts, it was excellent. The art was fantastic. The horror vibe, the actual setup of the story. I wish this was a real thing. I can't wait for this movie to come out, because I love those old monster movies. And to set up something that exists within, that doesn't really exist, but to set up something like, hey, there could have been this movie out there and it was that good. It would have been epic to see. But to start out a book this way, I'm totally into it. Especially to find out, like, that there's this whole, like, secret clan or whatever, the Order of the Fly that's behind all this. But hey, that's my review. Let me know what you thought about the book. If you picked it up, did you read it? What'd you think about it? Were your thoughts in line with mine? What do you think is coming? I don't know. Especially since we lost our first two characters. It looks like Orson and Mr. Forrest. But let me know down below what you thought. Like, comment, subscribe. Please comment. But that's all I got for you. I will see y'all later.